Hello and welcome to my first ever Blender beginner tutorial in which we will be learning the basics of 3D modeling on the computer as well as rendering. This on the left is going to be the final result we're going for. This Wacom pen is a good beginner project in which we will be learning some basic techniques that can be applied to your future projects. This is going to be a multiple part series. The first part, we're going to go over the Blender interface and learn how to add, move, rotate, and scale objects. In the second part, we're going to model the main body of the pen, everything except the silver part and the button. In the third part, we're going to model this silver part and the button. The fourth part is going to be kind of optional, where we add in this logo to the silver part. And then the fifth part, is going to be adding materials and rendering this out. So before we get started, a couple things to do. I sent you a zip folder to your email. Download that and unzip it. That's going to have our project file in it. And then download Blender. I'll have included a link in the email and also hopefully in the description of this video to the site where you can download the latest version of Blender. Get that downloaded and installed. If you've not done both of those things, just pause the video and take care of that and come back. So with that, we will get started. All right, so when you open the file that I sent you, the Wacom pen 01.blend, this is the screen you should see. We've got this pen image loaded in here that we'll use as a template to trace around later. We've got a menu up here that we'll be using, some buttons over here, and some buttons up here that we'll be using as well. When you first open Blender, it can seem pretty overwhelming with all of the different buttons and modes, but for this tutorial, we're just going to stick to the essentials for what it takes to model this pen. So don't worry, we will get through it. I'm using a keyboard with a numpad on it, which I highly recommend. The numpad has some key shortcuts that we'll be using. For example, numpad 1 is going to bring up a front view. Numpad 3 is going to bring up a right side view, and a numpad 7 is going to bring up a top view, which we'll be using a lot because that's the view that we are able to see the shape of the pen in. I will be sending out a list of shortcuts that we will be using for this project. There are more complete lists out there on the internet, but I've kind of narrowed it down to just what we need to get started. For switching between those views, like I was just talking about, the numpad 1, 3, and 7, you can get away without having a numpad. You would just switch between the views up here where it says view, go down to viewpoint, and then click on whichever view you would like to see. The numpad's just going to make things a lot quicker, and we'll be using shortcuts more often than not in this project. So, going over orbiting, panning, and zooming in the viewport. I'm on a Mac, and I'm using a mouse with a left button, right button, and a middle scroll wheel. You can use a magic mouse if you have that, and I'll go over how to go around the viewport with both of them. For the mouse with the scroll wheel, that is also a middle mouse click. Scrolling in the viewport is going to zoom. Clicking your middle mouse and dragging is going to orbit around the viewport. And then shift, middle mouse click, and drag around is going to pan, like you see here. So that's scroll to zoom, middle mouse click and drag to orbit, and then shift middle mouse click and drag to pan. On the Magic Mouse, using the trackpad that you would use to scroll is going to orbit. So just tracking around is going to orbit. Shift and track around is going to pan. And command track around or scroll up and down is going to zoom. So that's track to orbit, shift track to pan, and command scroll to zoom in and out. And if you happen to be using a PC, the key shortcuts are just a little bit different. Whenever I'm using command on the Mac, it's going to be control on the PC. And whenever I'm using option on the Mac, it's going to be alt on a PC. All right, so let me turn on screencast key so you can see what I'm pressing. Let's start by adding an object to the scene. So we can go up here, click add, and then you have these drop downs of different primitives that you can add to the scene. The shortcut for this is Shift A. That's going to bring up that same menu. So we're going to hit Shift A, we're going to go to Mesh, and then we're going to add a cube. And we'll just be able to practice manipulating this object around in the viewport. So as you're orbiting, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're trying to orbit around something and view it, but it is not in the center of the screen, like this, all you have to do is select the object, and you select objects by left mouse button clicking them. So select your object and then hit numpad period, and that's going to center whatever object or objects you have selected in your viewport, and you'll be able to rotate around them as they're the center. I am just going to undo by hitting Command Z to get that back to the center, and then hitting numpad period to center that in my view again. All right, up here we have some buttons that we'll explore. This first button is your select button, and you can left mouse click to select an individual object. If we had multiple objects, you could shift and click multiple objects to select them, or you can drag a box around the objects you want to select, and that will select them as well. We can ignore this cursor for now. The next button down is going to be move. So if we hit that, it's going to bring up this gimbal with some arrows on it. And we can use these to move our object around the scene. So if we click in the middle, it's going to move your object around freely on a plane that is parallel to whatever view you have on your screen. And then if we hit these arrows, it's going to move them only in one direction. So you can see this red arrow corresponds to this red line going across your screen, which is your x-axis, which you can also see up here on this gimbal, which will show you sort of how you're oriented no matter what view you're looking at on the viewport. This green arrow is your y-axis, which is kind of front and back, forward and backwards in your screen. And it corresponds to this y-axis that you see here on your screen. And the z arrow is up and down on the z-axis only, which is not visible here on the main viewport, but it is visible on this little gizmo up here. The shortcut for the move tool is going to be G. So if we hit G, we can move the object freely around on a plane that's parallel to your screen. So we can move just by dragging the mouse, and we can set the transform by either hitting enter or clicking on the screen. If I'm going to undo that using Command Z, If you want to use your shortcut and move it along one specific axis, you would hit G, and then you would hit whatever letter for whatever axis you want to move it along. So if I want to move this along only this green y-axis, I've already hit G, then I would hit Y, and your movement gets constrained to only the y-axis. So then again, enter or click will set the transformation, and then something new, if you want to escape out, then you just hit the escape button and it'll make it like it never happened. If you know how much you want to move something in a particular direction, you can do that as well. So let's say I want to move this square 1 unit over to the right or on the z-axis here. I can hit G to move, X to constrain the movement only to the x-axis, and then I can type in the number 1, and it will snap it to 1 unit over on the x-axis, and you can see up here that you have typed in 1. Enter or click on the screen is going to set that transformation, and escape is going to cancel out. And this works for any of the axes. So I want to do the same on moving it up 1 unit on the Z. I would hit G, Z, and then 1, and it's going to pop it up 1 unit. So that is sort of the move tool. The next one down is the rotate tool. So if you click that with your object selected and you click and drag in the middle, it's going to give you this free rotation, which I don't honestly use very often because it's not very precise. But if I undo that and then I click on one of these circles, it's going to rotate around only the axis of whatever color circle you're clicking on. So if I click on this green circle and drag, it's going to rotate it only around the green or y-axis like you see here. If I click on the Z, it's going to only rotate around the z-axis. And then, of course, red for the x-axis is going to rotate around only the red axis. The shortcut for the rotate tool is R. So hitting R is going to bring up this rotation that you see here, with the axis of rotation being perpendicular to your screen. This works kind of best. Let's switch to top view, numpad 7. Here, actually, no, it doesn't. Scratch that. If you click in the center and you have this free rotation, it's, like I said, pretty unpredictable, so I don't use it very often, and I stick to using the constraints, where I constrain it to rotate around one axis or another. So R is going to bring up that free rotation, and then if I want to rotate it around this y-axis, I'm going to hit Y, and it's going to constrain the rotation only to the y-axis. So that was R, and then the axis you want to rotate around, Y. And then click enter to, or click or enter to set the rotation, escape to escape out of it. And that works with any of the X, Y, or Z axes. If I know the amount that I want to rotate it, let's say I want to rotate it 45 degrees around the Z axis, I would hit R, Z to constrain it to the Z axis, and then I would type in 45 to rotate it 45 degrees. And you can see up in the upper left that it tells you what you've typed in. Then I can hit enter to set that rotation. The next tool is the scale tool, and it works very similarly to the other two tools. When you click this button, it's going to bring up this gizmo. One thing is if you click in the center and drag, it's going to do a uniform scale in all directions equally, which actually is useful, and we use that a lot. And then clicking on and dragging on each of these is going to scale them on only the one axis, whichever axis you click. You can scale it a specific amount if you would like. As well, the shortcut for the scale tool is S. So hitting S and dragging is going to give you a uniform scale. And then if you want to constrain that only to the y-axis, for example, you hit Y and then it's going to scale it only on the y-axis. Again, if you know the amount that you want to scale it, you can type it in. So if I want to scale it up 2 times on the z-axis, I would hit S, then Z to constrain it to the z-axis, and then I would type in 2 and hit enter. If you have these gimbals showing and you don't want them to be showing because they're getting in the way, just switch back to your selection tool up here, and the gimbal will disappear. So we've been talking about manipulating this object as a whole so far. There's a way, a very useful way, to sort of edit this by the different points on it and the different faces and the different edges, and that is edit mode. So far, we've been working in object mode. So to switch to edit mode, we go up here to the upper left and click the drop down where it says object mode and click into edit mode. The shortcut for this is tab. So hitting tab is going to toggle between object and edit mode. And edit mode allows you to work on one object at a time. And that's whichever object you had selected when you were in object mode, and hit tab to go into edit mode. Edit mode is kind of like the direct selection mode tool in Illustrator, where it allows you to work on individual points, and in this case, edges and also faces. So we can see here that we are able to select these little vertices at the corners. It's called vertex select mode, and the button to get to it is up here in the upper left, this first one with a little vertex on it. The shortcut to it is the number 1 above the letters on your keyboard. And that hotkey is only going to work when you're in edit mode to select vertices. The next selection mode we can go to is this edge select up here. And the shortcut is the number 2 above the letters on your keyboard. And that allows you to select the different edges of this cube. The third mode is face mode. This button up here, or the number 3 above the letters on your keyboard, and you can select the different faces. Selection works the same as in object mode. When you're selecting different objects, you can shift and click to select multiple faces, edges, or vertices, whatever mode you're in, to select multiples at once. Or you can click and drag to just click a box around what you want to select. We have the same move, rotate, and scale tools over here. We can ignore all of these new tools that popped up below. We won't be needing to click on those buttons. But you have all of the same controls as far as moving, rotating, and scaling as you did in object mode. So I'm in face mode right now. I've selected this, and I can click this move tool to be able to manipulate this one face that I have selected. It works just the same as in object mode, where G is the shortcut for move. So I can hit G, and then if I want to constrain this movement to the y-axis, for example, I hit Y, and the movement is only going to be on the y-axis. So same thing for rotate and scale. I can scale just that one face. All right, I am just going to jump in here with one last thing. So far, we have been working with this cube as a solid object, and you can't see through it. When you're in edit mode and you're trying to select, let's say, all of the vertices, when you're in this solid mode, it's only going to select what is facing your screen, so we can see that this back vertex was left off. We can select all the way through an object using this toggle X-ray button up here. So if we toggle that on, we can see through our object and select all the way through it. Also, we'll be able to kind of see where the edges of our pen are when we're making the shape of it in X-ray mode, which will be very helpful. If you ever are seeing something kind of unexpected in the viewport, like this grayed out box, it's often because one of these buttons is pressed incorrectly for our use. So always just check up here. We want to make sure this solid sphere is selected, and then we'll be toggling between X-ray and solid modes. So that is it for part 1 of this tutorial. Play around with switching between object and edit mode, and manipulating the object using the vertex, edge, and faces, as well as adding different objects using Shift-A in object mode from this list, and playing around with those as well. Get familiar with the interface, and we'll be back in part 2 to actually start modeling this pen. Thank you.